Hey guys, Daryl here again. So you got your Zen out of the package and you want to actually use it. So you got to put switches in. So here's a little demonstration on how to install your switches into your keyboard in the best way. I would start by flipping the power switch and turning it off just to be safe. You don't want accidental shorts or something if you accidentally jam or press too hard or something. So okay, I've got it shut down. So you grab your switches, dump some out. So on the switch, there's two metal contacts and 3 plastic pins. Most likely, some switches have these 2 pins missing and there'll only be 1 pin, but I suspect that most of the keyboards most of the people watching this video are going to have the ones with the PCB 3 pins. The metal contacts on your switches should be straight and not bent. If you come across a switch that has bent pins and you don't have extra, try to straighten them up with a pair of needle nose pliers or something to make sure they're sticking out straight. If they're not going to hit the holes in your hot swap sockets, so you want to make sure that those are nice and straight. And something else to remind you about is the sockets themselves that the metal pins go into are soldered on the bottom of the PCB. And here's an example of that. So all the pressure that you put when you're pushing in that switch is going to be on the little solder pad on either side of this socket. So what's highly recommended is that you support the socket on the bottom side when pushing in your switch. You're like, okay, well, there's a bottom on this keyboard and I can't actually touch the socket. The tolerances between the socket and the base of the keyboard are so close that you can actually, and you can see the outlines of the sockets. You can put your finger there and you actually will have enough support to hold that socket from underneath when you push in a switch. So I highly recommend doing that one by one, finding where the socket is, put your finger behind it, grab your switch, okay, making sure that the pins line up. So in this scenario, the little window on the switch is always at the top and the pins are always at the bottom, so the stem looks like a letter T. That's the way they have to be oriented in this particular keyboard. So you put it in, you make sure that those metal pins, and you're never going to be able to see this on the camera, but make sure those pins get guided in. These plastic tabs here sometimes are sticking out a bit further and you might have to just tuck them in a little bit, but once it goes in, you'll hear it snap, and that's how your switch goes in. There shouldn't be a whole ton of force required, and if there is, it's probably because those plastic tabs that kind of hook underneath the aluminum plate they may be bent out a little bit too far and need to be pushed in just a bit. So that's all there really is to it. And once you get kind of going on it, now my finger is underneath and it's in place, I'll just push those plastic tabs in, and that's literally all it takes. You just keep going right across. I like starting from one side so that the other switches aren't in the way when I move across. It seems the easiest for me, but you can do it wherever you want. And another thing to notice is the thumb key is actually oriented different than the rest of them. If you notice that the metal pin or the socket is on this side, so what that means is rather than the switch going in like this, the switch has got to go in like this. And then once that's in place, that's that. So that's how the switches go in. It's really not that bad, and you know, it's a heck of a lot harder to get out. Speaking of which, if you wanted to get these out, there's only really a couple ways to do it. I should also mention that these sockets are only rated for so many inserts and removals. So don't expect to be changing your switches on a daily basis, because your sockets aren't going to last a whole long time. So I recommend trying the switches that you're looking for first to see if you're going to like it, and if you think they'll be okay, then put them in the keyboard and then start typing on it. I mean, you can totally remove them, but the more you do that, the more the sockets kind of get loose, and the harder it gets to make contact. After time, you may start losing contact because the metal contacts in the sockets start to spread a little bit. But for removing it, there's only really two things you can do. You either get under an edge with a fingernail or something like that and pry until the one side kind of pops out, and then work on the other like that. That may be very difficult for you. I think these switches have been in and out of keyboards a couple times, so they might be worn in a bit. If you are unable to get under the switch and you're hesitant on using a tool that you're afraid is going to scratch the anodization on the keyboard, your only other option is to remove the 5 screws on the bottom and push the plastic pins out from the back side of with a fingernail, or I sometimes use the bottom of my X-Acto knife. You just put it on the spot and push, and you'll hear it click out of the plate. But those are only the really two ways of doing it. And when it's full of switches, it's much harder to get access to the ones that are beside another switch, because you can't get in there as well. So you're going to have to start from the edge and work your way in, and not everyone's fingernails are strong enough to do that. I've heard maybe a plastic tool that you use to open iPhones or whatever, or a guitar pick or something might work, but it's not an incredibly easy thing to do. Certainly much harder than putting the switches in, so keep that in mind, I guess. Yeah, and once the keycaps are in place, you just have to once the switches are in place, you grab your keycaps, and I'm guessing, yeah, I have none here. Most people are going to be using MBK keycaps, which are great. You just have to remember that the thumb switch is rotated, so that means if you're using a 1U or a single up keycap, it has to be rotated around 90 degrees to fit into this. If you're using a 1.5U, which is a little bit longer, there's only one way it's really going to go, because you couldn't have a 1.5U sitting there. There's not enough room, so that'll be just natural. But yeah, so that's how you put your switches in. If you have any questions, hit me up on Discord, or ask anyone in that Discord. There's lots of experienced people there who will be able to help you out with dealing with switches. Yeah, that's it. Have a good one.